Welcome to our podcast today, and I am so pleased to have you join us to learn more about how we can do ministry with technology. Today, I have Bailey Cole with me, who has recently graduated and started a career in communication and marketing. So welcome, Bailey. If you could introduce yourself and tell us how things are going in your new career and what you're doing in ministry.
Hi, thank you, Mark. Thanks for having me today. Like Mark said, my name's Bailey Cole. I started out with my passion for working with communications and marketing and ministry when I started at my campus ministry, Christian Campus House at Eastern Illinois University. We realized that there was a lack of a social media presence, and in today's world, that's where nonprofits kind of thrive. And so we called it a media group, to where I was managing all of our social media accounts, things like that, and a lot of interactions just with students online. And then that actually kicked off my career at Wesley United Methodist Church. I was their communications coordinator, and I was in charge of everything from their social media to their website creation, to also like Sunday services and using different softwares for that. We used Servant Keeper as our database that we also ran to collect all of our membership information. And then we used ProPresenter for all of our Sunday services, things like that. Anything we need created, that was kind of part of my role at the church. And yeah, I feel like with using the newer technology like that, it kind of brought the church up to speed with where it was supposed to be and made it more relevant and made it more modern. And I felt like that attracted a lot more people, especially in the younger generation.
Well, that is great. There's so much meat in there that we need to dive into. So let's first of all thank you for coming and spending about 20 minutes to a half an hour. But just in that matter of about 2 or 3 minutes, you mentioned software titles, you mentioned roles that you have. Why don't we just, before we dive into those a bit, let's just take a little bit of a step back. And how did you get into this? What did you just kind of fall into it because there was a need at Campus House or the church, or did you graduate from high school and say that's what I want to be? Because I know when I graduated high school, I wanted to be a Navy fighter pilot, and here I am running IT shops, and those cannot be pretty much farther from one another. So how did this work out for you?
Yeah, so I actually started out as an education major, and I realized it wasn't for me. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, so I just took a bunch of random classes my freshman year, and Intro to Public Relations and Communications is actually the one class that I enjoyed, and so that kind of directed me in my path of wanting to go the marketing and PR route. And yeah, from there on, I just tried to find as many ways that I could get experience as I could. And I had a lot of different passions, but one of mine was our campus ministry, and another one was marketing. And so I said, why not we just combine both of those things and create a media action group?
Great. So you wanted to be a teacher, and you extracted from that the part where you want to be able to speak publicly in front of each other, and created this new thing to go into PR, well, not new, but for you, new, go into PR and communications, which then branched out into you can use that gift in the church. And so that is outstanding. And, I think this is a good message for those listeners that are here, is that just because somebody's not in technology, or because they're not doing something right now, that you would pigeonhole, if you will, that person into being technology. There are plenty of folks out there that might find a new passion or might find a new opportunity as a result of giving them a try, or allowing them to try and work things through. So that is great that your career has gone that way. So why don't we talk about this MAG? Because I come from the military background, so everything has to have an acronym. The MAG, the Media Action Group that you talk about. Tell me how that came about and how you formed that. What is the consistency of that? Is it just a group of people that want to do media, or was there structure to it and things along those lines? So why don't you talk to me about that a little bit?
Yeah, so and whenever I started my campus ministry, I think we had a Facebook and an Instagram page, and they posted, not very often. And when they did post, it was just not super up to date, not super modern. And I think me and our lead pastor, Matthew Thomas, he actually came to me because he knew that that was a passion of mine that I had. And he's like, what if we, got this more up to date? What if we created this? Because it's very popular within like kids and students our age. And so why don't we make this more modern? And so we attract those types of people. And it's the fastest way that you can reach people is through the internet. And so, yeah, so we started, creating this group. And I think even now they have a large group of students that are interacting in this media action group, and they have everything from like a Snapchat to a very active Instagram, Spotify playlist. I mean, all different things, Facebook. And Elise did such a great job with their website and a lot of their like graphic design stuff. And I think this action group paired really well with what she was doing.
Okay. So there's a couple of things there. Number one, Elise, for those of you that hadn't watched a previous episode, Elise was on our episode 4. So I encourage you to go back and look at episode 4. This will be episode 5, or is episode 5 in publication. But there's another important piece that you said that is important for leadership and important for the pastors. You were talking about how Matthew, your lead minister there, said, hey, I see this possibility in you, and here's my vision for this. Here's my ideas for this. Now, did Matthew just kind of at that point share his vision and then step back and let you run with it and lead it? Or was he micromanaging it? Or how did that work out? Because I think this is a great lesson for, I'm guessing, for our leaders out there, that they can have great vision, but I'm guessing that Matthew let you run with it.
Yeah, so the great thing about our campus ministry is a lot of it is student led, and that's on purpose, because whenever you grow up and you become a volunteer in the church, you hope that your leadership can trust that they have good volunteers. And so I think that's kind of what Matthew was doing, was he was giving me the trust to do whatever I wanted creatively, and he was kind of like the mentor role in that position. And I think that is definitely a great example for all. Like you cannot micromanage your volunteers and the people that are working within the church. You have to just kind of trust that they have a vision and a gift that God has given them, and just go from there.
Great. So I'm guessing if he had micromanaged your MAG group, that action group probably wouldn't have flourished as well as it did and moved beyond to where it is now. And then, another key piece of leadership that you showed here is that, now that you're out of Campus House, because there's only a short period of time while you're in school that you're part of Campus House, that group continues on. So talk to me how you built that group and made it so it survived beyond you as the leader.
Yeah, so it was kind of hard to let go of as I graduated, because it was like this baby that we raised. We started from nothing with that group. But yeah, I think especially my senior year, I was worried about, what's going to happen. Is this all going to die off? Like, no one's going to be able to do this like I can, kind of like that ego that you kind of have to suppress a little bit. And we had a few students step up who were also on the leadership team and took over that role. And they did a fantastic job. I mean, they really just hit the road running, and they've really carried it on, and they've extended it through like Snapchat and Spotify playlists and things like that. And I still follow them today because I love to see what they're doing. And yeah, they're very creative and they have a very similar gift. So it's great to see that.
That is great. Now here we are. We're on a podcast about technology. We're trying to convey technology, and we haven't even touched technology yet. Now, the reason I say that is because I think it's absolutely important that everybody understands that the human aspect that goes into all of this before we even touch the technology is important. There's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence that's out there right now. Now, ChatGPT and things like that are just going to kind of take over, or perhaps even have taken over on some aspects. But, talk to me a little bit about, from your ministry perspective, how it's important that you manage and that you rule and run these pieces of technology versus allowing it to rule and manage, and talk about it from the perspective of the limitations or even the capabilities of the technology that are there, where you as the human aspect have to be the master of that rather than it the master of you.
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. So I feel like with whenever you run any kind of social media page that's open to the public, it has to stand out. It can't be cookie cutter. It can't look like everyone else's. And I think that's the beauty of having real people run your page is you can feel the emotion in in their posts. You can see through pictures and things like that, things that a robot or GTP or whatever AI, whatever they can do, they can't do it as well as a person. And I think especially like whenever it's ministry, people are looking for that personal connection. They're looking for something that's really personal to them. And I think there's no way to do that with AI.
Excellent. So we want to look at, kind of like making sure that even though it's technology, that people are known, valued, and loved. An authentic relationship, authenticism inside of the technology is absolutely important. Do you have a story, perhaps, or just an example that you can share where you were authentic through the Facebook or through the social media pages that resulted in someone coming into your ministry or maybe approaching you about how it might have impacted that post or that series of actions might have impacted their life as a result of the authenticity that you showed through Facebook or the social media that you did?
Yeah, so a series I actually did whenever I was leading our social media accounts was highlighting seniors, and basically they wrote like their story, and I talked to them
And,
about
and, and for the record, just so that people know, these are seniors in school, not seniors as in age.
yes, yes, college age seniors.
There you
Yes.
go.
Yes. Yeah, so we would interview them and talk to them and have us send in things about, like how they found the ministry, like what the ministry meant to them, like their plans after college. And I think that whenever other students who weren't involved in our campus ministry but did follow, or even like parents, whenever they got to see like how the ministry changed their lives and the different ways they're impacted. And with social media being able to touch so many people's lives, I think that was a great like personal aspect of like people could see how the ministry changed these people and that they could have that same experience too. Yeah,
Great.
so I think that was a really good personal connection.
Great. Now, have you ever had a situation where that social media, whatever it may be, has caused a disruption where somebody didn't appreciate something you posted, or maybe that you posted a picture and they didn't want their face on it, and how you responded to that? Do you have any situations like that?
Um, I do not, but whenever I worked at the Wesley United Methodist Church. It's actually right across the street from my campus ministry, and I was running their social media pages. I really experienced like the importance of getting people's permission to post themselves or their children or things like that, because with everyone having social media and it has a lot of perks, but there's also a lot of downsides and it can be dangerous.
Right.
So yeah, it really emphasized like the importance of getting people's permission to post online.
Yeah, that is perfect. I know, in what I do professionally in information security, getting that permission to post, having what we call opt-in or opt-out is absolutely important, especially when you're dealing with children or perhaps families that are for lack of a better term, dysfunctional, perhaps separated. When there's situations like that, those are absolutely important. So, did you get those permissions in writing, or did you just do it verbally and everything worked out fine? How did you go about getting that permission and working with that?
Luckily that the church I worked at was small enough to where if they didn't want their face or their information like publicized, they would come to us. But it could see in like kind of a mega church situation with things like that, how that could definitely cause a problem, and there would probably need to be like some type of waiver or like permission
Right.
granted in those situations. But yeah, because the church was so small, everyone kind of knew everyone, and they kind of knew my role, and they would come to me and just let me know verbally.
So
Yeah.
I would agree that more the smaller church with a more homey feel, if you will. That's a great way to approach it. And you're absolutely right. If you're in a church, 250, maybe 200 and larger, where you start losing that individual connection between the leaders and everyone. having that waiver, perhaps, as somebody checks their child in on the Sunday morning service or something along those lines, is probably one of those areas that's going to save you from future liability, even if it may not today. It might, 10 years from now or 5 years from now, because we're running into such a litigious society today. So all that is absolutely splendid information. Now, you had said you also managed the website. So talk to me about some of the things you did to manage the website, and what kind of technology specifically were you working with there? I mean, did you use a content provider and you just kind of move things around like a Wix, or did you develop the websites individually and build from there, or did you hire it out? How did that work out?
Yeah, so we actually had a program called Clover Sites,
Mhm.
and it pairs with Clover Give. I don't know if you're familiar with that. And so it made it easy for people to give their tithe or whatever donation they wanted to on our website, and it made it sync really well. But that's what I used to build out our website. Yeah, we talked as a staff for a long time, trying to figure out what software, what website we wanted to use. For that type of thing, because there's a million and one different website
Mhm.
building softwares out there. But
Right.
yeah, so we used like I don't know if it was more like Wix, but it was definitely a program that like kind of walked you through what you wanted to do, but it gave you enough flexibility to where you could make it your own and kind of design your own and what you wanted it to really look like. Um, but yeah, it was a long process building out a website, but it was definitely worth it. Whenever I started my position at the Wesley Church, their website was just kind of a mess. No one knew where anything was. It was just kind of run by like a large group of staff. And so it was really nice to have like one person who could manage it all and create something that was easier to navigate.
Okay. So talk to me about the process you went through for creating the website. Did you sit down with various people throughout the church and kind of work with them to develop content, or you just run at it as a lone ranger, if you will, and go out there and throw some stuff up and then let people come to you later saying, hey, we need to change this or that? Because I've seen some churches get in trouble with both sides of that. So how did you go about that, and what are some of the things that you learned from that process?
Yeah, so something I learned is that whenever you're creating a website, especially with a church that has a bunch of different boards and programs and groups, you have to be really respectful of other people and what you want to include, and what information you want to provide on the website. And people tend to get their feelings hurt if their
Mhm.
um, group isn't included or their program that they're putting on. So yeah, I sat down every week with our staff and just wanted their opinions, like what are we missing, what could be added, how could we improve what we're creating here. And it was nice to get the different opinions of the different people who were involved in these different groups and what was most important to be
Okay.
um, added.
So perhaps maybe three. Sounds like you sat down and you had some questions. What are you missing? What are we doing right? What are we doing wrong? And how can we improve? And those were kind of reiterating those questions over and over again. Is that kind of how you approach that?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so as a PR and a communications expert and professional that you are now, talk to me about the content itself. Does it need to be brief? Does it need to be long? What are trends right now for social media and for websites in order to retain a person's interest long enough for you to get your message across to that individual?
Yeah, absolutely. My advice would be keep it brief. I think in one of my classes we learned like why TikTok was so popular was because the videos weren't longer than like 10 seconds at the time. And everyone's attention span has gone down, tremendously. I think it's like the average 20-year-old's attention span is like 3 or 4 seconds. And so you kind of have to take that into consideration when building out these types of things, because you can't have long paragraphs, because you're really going to lose people. You got to keep it brief, concise, and just have points of like what your most important topics are, because if you don't, you're really going to lose people.
Are there different rules or different communication styles on the same page for multi-generational scenarios? Like you just talked about, the brief 3 to 10 second TikTok video, which, by the way, as a cybersecurity expert, my whatever hair I have left, I pull out because of TikTok. That would be a whole different conversation, but and has to deal with China and national defense type things. But that's a different story. But is there a multi-generational kind of a field that you have to be considering when you put together a website like that, or some sort of professional presentation for PR and marketing?
Yeah, so I really think it all just depends on knowing your audience. Like if you are a younger church and you are targeting a younger audience, you have to really keep in mind like those statistics. Like what are these people looking for? What keeps their attention? Opposed to like an older generation, if you have an older church, like you got to keep in mind like what are they looking for, and even are they even gonna visit your website? Like, can you make this easily accessible for them? Because some older people that I learned from when I worked at Wesley is they would tell me things were too complicated. It was hard for them to access these things. So yeah, you definitely have to keep in mind what age groups you're working with and who your target audience is.
Okay. And are there different blocks of target audience? Like if we're talking college age, does that cover high school kids, or is college age include high school through 30, and then there's 30 to 50 and 50 on up, or what are those kinds of demographic blocks that you should pay attention to?
Yeah, so I would just even keep in mind like who was around when the iPhone came out, what age groups have iPhones at the time. Yeah. Yeah, like who, just keeping in mind like those types of things. I would think things that apply to a high school kid would also apply to a college kid, but what would apply for a high school kid wouldn't necessarily apply for like a junior high kid. And so I really think it just depends on what people's capabilities are, but I would say probably anyone below the age of 30, I would definitely start targeting with a more modern approach.
Okay. All right. So it really goes back to the most important thing you said a few moments ago in this block is know your audience. And probably I would gather, and maybe you could tell me different, but know your audience and know your environment, or know your locale. Because I'm guessing that the way you would reach out to somebody who's in their 20s and 30s in central Illinois or in the Midwest would be different than you would in an urban environment like Dallas, or along the East or West Coast, or something along those lines. Is that accurate or not?
I would say so. Yes.
Okay.
Because you have so many different factors coming into play, just environment, like
Okay.
politically, like all kinds of different things, the different environments that they're used to being around for
Okay.
sure.
And of course, unlike a large corporation, a church is very specific or specific. It's very specific to a geographic area of maybe 30 miles. If you put a pin in the church and you drew a circle around it, is that pretty much what you're looking at? Is what's going on in that 30-mile range?
Yeah, so our target at the time, because we were a smaller church, and we have different towns around us, was just like what is going on in Charleston, and especially with being close to Eastern Illinois University, being 500 feet from their campus, our target was like, okay, what's going on campus? Like who is there? Who are our people that we're trying to bring in to our house of worship? That type of thing.
All right, great. Now, my last question on the websites, and then we're going to go talk about ProPresenter or other Sunday morning software for a few moments. But with the website, did you relinquish control to other parties within the church that were perhaps not paid staff, but just ministry leaders or deacons or Sunday school leaders or something like that, in order to make changes to certain pages, or did you control all of that within yourself or within a very small group in order to ensure the message was clear?
Yeah, so our communications department was a department of one. It
Okay.
was just me. So I was kind of in control of all of those different types of things. And whenever people needed changes to like their certain pages or they had a comment or opinion about something, they came to me and, take that into consideration. And I would, sit side by side with them and be like, okay, like, what would you like to see? What is your vision for what you have?
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's
Okay.
yeah, I feel like our demographic was a little bit older, so opening that up to them was never really an option. But yeah, they were able to come to me with their different opinion.
Well, that's interesting. Your church is 500 feet from a college campus, but your demographic was older. That's a really interesting piece. And I lied. We're going to go back and we're going to talk about one simple thing. You mentioned opinions, and how did you handle situations on Facebook where someone would put something inflammatory? How would you moderate that as a either a member of that MAG, that ministry action group, or as the communication director of the church? How would you go about? Would you delete that? Would you modify it? How did you moderate that situation?
Yeah, so we really didn't experience that much with my college ministry, but I did experience that a little bit with the Wesley Church when I worked there, which was very interesting because it seemed to be the older generation that would have more of the hate comments or
Hmm.
the trolls, if that's the word you want to
No,
use.
use them, use them. People need to understand those words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I feel like
You
we
said the
definitely,
older generation was more the trolls than the younger generation. Wow. Okay.
yes. Yeah. And it was a surprise to me too. But I feel like people get some type of security when they're behind a screen and they feel like they can express their opinions more freely.
Mhm. I have a new term for you. I've used this for a couple of years, so it's not new, but I call them keyboard bandits.
There you go.
They
Yeah.
say anything they want as long as they're typing on the keyboard. But then when you and I are talking face to face, they're like, "Oh, very polite and very helpful." And
Yes.
keyboard bandits. That's my term.
Yes, and you hate to see that even in the church, but everywhere has them, and it's just real life. But yeah, if it just kind of depended. If it was just like a random person just wanting to put hate comments on, a Christian post, that type of thing, obviously that person is blocked or they are deleted. But it made it really complicated whenever it was a member of the church
Yeah.
who would post those type of things. And obviously online, I would try to be as neutral as possible. Social media, I believe, is not the place to have those controversial conversations, especially whenever you are a church. And so, yeah, that made it very difficult, especially when you had to see those people in person later. So I don't have the right answer for that one, because people are gonna people.
Yeah.
So
I love that. People are going to people. That's okay. I'm writing that one down. All right. Let's wrap this up with just a few moments about Sunday morning service, because Sunday morning services in the worship service when you're doing things with IT is just as much communication and just as much technology as talking about websites and social media. So you had mentioned that you use ProPresenter. Not everybody's probably familiar with ProPresenter. Why don't you first of all describe what that product is and how it helped you out, and then we can kind of go from there with it. But how did you use that product? What's it for? Things along those lines.
yeah, so when I started at Wesley, they were just doing PowerPoint Sunday services.
Mhm.
And that bothered me. As someone who's younger, who's more modern,
It's
I
a
really
step
want
above the hymnals, though. So you're
one step.
progressing.
They had those too.
Yeah.
They were old school, which I respected. I thought it was great. But yeah, they used PowerPoint, and I really wanted to change it up a bit. I wanted to make it a little bit more exciting, a little bit more up to date. And so I convinced them to get ProPresenter, and ProPresenter is a presentation software that we use on Sundays for our PowerPoints, for our countdown clocks, those types of things. And they also have everything in their shop, from like social media posts to different themes you can do throughout the year, different campaigns, that type of thing. Yeah, and we use them on Sunday services or any other service they wanted to have, just to kind of liven up Sundays a little bit.
All right, great. So you mentioned a countdown clock. That's an important thing I've seen in a couple of churches where you're putting it up on the screen, you're warning people, hey, 5 minutes from now, and there may be some background. So does ProPresenter allow you to put in background music and other types of visually stimulating things that will get you ready for worship and prepare for that? What are some little intricacies, if you will, with ProPresenter that you enjoyed using?
Yeah, so I really enjoyed like the different themes you could have like every week. And yeah, the countdown clocks, they really changed. I feel like that church because you have people in the bathroom, you have people talking and so whenever you have that timer up there, it's like okay, like you can socialize, do those things, but whenever the timer's done, like that's when service starts. And so I feel like people were really respectful of that and it kind of got services going in more of a flow, which was really nice. So yeah, I did appreciate that. Then services weren't running over. People weren't getting upset about too long of a service because you were able to start on time. So that's definitely my favorite, probably one of my favorite features of ProPresenter.
Okay. My last question in regards to ProPresenter is how difficult is it for a church that's never done that kind of thing? They're going from that PowerPoint where they're probably keying in everything and deciding what the background looks like. How easy is it to transition and then use on Sunday morning? Does it require an 18-year-old volunteer who knows how to use technology, or can it be the 50-year-old who just can pick it up pretty quick and run with it?
Yeah, so I honestly don't think it's very I don't think it's very user friendly if I
Oh,
had to be honest. But there is a learning curve, and I feel like once you do learn it, it becomes easier and you can kind of figure out the ins and outs. It did seem a little bit more complicated. We actually had someone from a local church that used it come over and had to show us kind of the ins and outs.
oh.
Yeah, and we switched over, or we were thinking about switching over to Media Shout, which was a different presenter service that our new pastor that had come into the church, they used at their last church, and he said it was more user friendly.
Okay. So, all right. Well, maybe we'll take a closer look at Media Shout with somebody else. But I appreciate your honesty on that, because there's probably a lot of churches out there that have heard about ProPresenter, because I know a lot of the mega churches use it. I've heard about not even mega churches, even a 150 person church has used that. So I appreciate your honesty. But your piece of advice, I think, is more important. Well, to some level, is more important than the honesty there. In that sense, you partnered with another church who was using it, who came over and they showed you the ins and the outs and got you going. And I think that piece is very important for churches to work together on these kinds of things. And really, that's kind of the purpose of this podcast here, is to start that conversation and for people to learn from you and Elise and others that I've spoken to about some of these ins and outs and the things that can be done through technology or through the management of technology, I like to say. So, all right, Bailey. Well, thank you for joining us. Is there any last words of wisdom? Because you've given us a ton of words of wisdom. I've written some of these things down, and people will be people. People will people, and that's a great one. I've written some. So, do you have any other words of wisdom for us before we let you go for the day?
Yeah. Social media can be a dark place, but it can also be a place to shine light. And I think that's kind of in today's world what the church is kind of called to do. So there's definitely a way to shine light in a dark world like the internet.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, and thank you for taking your time today to share this information with literally probably hundreds of other people and multiple churches. I know that this podcast will be viewed by some friends of mine, some new friends of mine in Alaska, because I'm going to share it with them, and they're going to probably use it for their church as they're doing some transitions. So your information will be immensely valuable for many people in many churches as they look at this. So thank you for sharing your time and your passion. And very much look forward to maybe having another conversation in the future. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I appreciate it.
All right.